Yes, a very good morning to you all, wherever you might be listening from around the world. We are coming live from Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's 10:27 a.m. here Central Time in the U.S., 11:27 Eastern Central Time, and it is 6:27 p.m. East African Time. Very honored to have on the show today no other but the president himself. On Saturday, not from Nairobi, Kenya, but from right here in Minneapolis, right on my desk today.
No, Okari, you don't want me to be fired, okay? You don't want me to be fired. I used to act as a president.
Okay,
not
so,
the president himself.
Walter Mong'are himself. So, honored to have you here today. We're going to engage in a very interesting conversation about that connecting with the diasporans. But before we start here, Mr. Mong'are, let's say good to see you and welcome to the United States. How are you doing so far?
Thank you very much. I'm having a fantastic time. Corona has got nothing on me, so we are rolling it out. We are waiting for the presidential election. I don't know whether it's Trump who's going to win or it's Joe Biden, but I'm also optimistic that I might just hang around long enough to vote. I'm not sure whether it works that way, but I'm happy to be here.
Okay, very good to have you. So I think it's interesting time just get into the gist of the conversation here, get into it. And thank you for mentioning Corona. Corona really has transformed the way we do things in the world, not on us individually, but businesses, organizations, and governments, including the government of the United States, and no doubt the government of Kenya and many other governments around the world. So let me begin by asking you, having come from Kenya a few days ago, how is Kenya and the Kenyan government dealing with the coronavirus?
Just like any other government and any other organization, we are also grappling with the pandemic, which is a new phenomenon as it is. The last pandemic that people experienced was in the early 1900s. So it's like in 100 years. So the level of preparedness, we can never say that governments were prepared for this. We can't say that we were, on top of things. There's been a lot of community transmission that is happening in Kenya, but it's under control. The government has done a fantastic job. The leadership of His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, and of course the CS for Health, Mutai Kagwe, they have done a fantastic job in keeping the curve also on the lowdown. So in Kenya, we are very optimistic that in the next 2 months, things will kind of regularize. But it has taught us a lesson, and we are all geared up with a new reset button for the country.
Very good. And I think that's why we're having this conversation today. So, and I'm sure I'm going to speak this not just behalf of KDRTV, but I'm going to talk about on behalf of many diasporans around the world who are thinking about the situation as is, and obviously thinking about the homeland. So I think as you are here, pass the message, and those ones watching this live from Kenya, please know that we here in diaspora are thinking about you, are wishing you well, and hoping that you take care of yourselves and all the precautions necessary, because we don't want to lose a life whatsoever. So good. Hopefully that you hear that, and thank you, government of Kenya, for doing that. And quite frankly, most governments in Africa have done a pretty good job. So Walter, let's start this conversation. A lot of people who know you do not know that you are my junior in college, but still you went ahead to become the president. Mzee Moi is gone. What are your thoughts? And I'm sure people associate you with the late President Daniel Arap Moi. Regardless of your thoughts politically, I think he made a significant contribution to the struggle for independence for our country, vice president and later as president. I think we need to pay tribute to that. And I think during your time in the comedy section, you did a good job trying to humanize him. What are your thoughts having him?
I must say that I'm always grateful to His Excellency, the former President of the Republic of Kenya, the late Mzee Moi, for having given us an opportunity to explore the talents that is within us using his office administration. Yes, it was tough then, but it was acceptable, and it changed the way people look at things. It demystified leadership. It changed the way we looked at the presidency. it became human, and Mzee became human, and may his soul rest in eternal peace. And if he was alive today, Banokari, with the fantastic job as we were having preparedness for this show, you realize we are 30 minutes late, and that is what it means to host a president material. You know what I'm saying? So we lost 30 minutes setting up and making sure that we have everything right. And if Mzee Moi was alive today, he would say, Ogari, utoga leo, wewe ni Janzola ya Kenyatta University. And that will be your appointment.
That's what I said. You have no idea how much I love Kenyatta University. The two of us happen to have gone to Kenyatta University during the Professor Ishwandi's time, and may he rest in peace. Yeah. And I think those ones watching in Kenya, the only dream job I want to have maybe when I go back to Kenya is teach at Kenyatta University or become Vice Chancellor of Kenyatta University. That's the only job I want to do in Kenya. Okay?
That's all right. That's okay. And that dream is valid. All you need to do is, by the way, we are back at home. The appointments, state appointments, are beginning to take the career perspective of skill-based, as opposed to theoretical prowess that one has through his degrees and everything else, or her degrees. So the country is gearing towards hiring people with competency and putting people of value and character in government. So you're very much in line with those thoughts. Keep dreaming, and the spaces are there.
Very good. So let's get to this now. Let's get to the conversation of the day. You, and as you see the heading there, is a candid conversation with the Director of Youth and Development, Walter Mong'are. You have a very senior position in Kenya government. But before we do so, most viewers might wonder why we change sets today. Today I'm running the show from the basement, and you are on the high desk, a very prestigious position there. And the reason for it is to ask you a simple question.
Yes, sir.
Quite frankly, Walter, we've had experiences here, and most diasporans will tell you this. We have had a lot of government officials from Kenya, even at county level, who've come here at times. We don't get to understand exactly why they come here, but thank you so much for calling on us and wanting to come on the show and working very closely with us so that we have this conversation for our viewers, and to make sure that we completely do away with what we call here the basement culture, where we have leaders who come here without a clear agenda. Would you mind telling our viewers why you're in the U.S.?
I'm in the U.S. To celebrate the new team that has been put together for Mwanyagitinge. As you know, that is the social organization for the Kisii community across the United States. And you have new bearers. And as a government official, personally, I'm very, very supportive of collaborative efforts and collaborative networks that enable us to share these experiences for purposes of prosperity. So I knew that there was a new team, there was new elections that took place for the Mwanyagitinge community. And I thought it would be nice for me just to join them as we celebrate the new leadership and join them, and we see the level of linkages and what we can do to bridge the gap between here and back at home for those of you who are very keen on coming back home.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We'll get to talk about the community affairs later in the show, but let's begin with your role as the youth development person in the office of the president. And I was looking at the numbers, and it was interesting that almost 56% of the Kenyan population really fall under the category of the youth. And we'll think about that, youth development. I'm thinking, well, the guy sitting on the set today really holds the future of our country. So do you mind very quickly telling our audience what that job entails?
All right. Thanks, Okari. One, the accurate data reflection back in the country is that the youth represent more than 60% of the population. And the median age as we speak in the country is 20.1. In essence, Kenya is a 20-year-old country. And that tells you that we need to start looking at our youth not as a liability and not as a problem to be solved, but as a future investment for the country in terms of leadership, in terms of innovations, in terms of dreams and aspirations for the future and now. So, as you've rightfully put it, it's a huge responsibility. One of the things that His Excellency the President, who's also the global champion for youth and young people's agenda across the globe, a designation that he was given by the United Nations. And and a tremendous opportunity for us to look beyond the borders. As the Director of Youth Development in the Office of the President, my responsibility and the responsibility of those that I work with is to mainstream the youth agenda across every sector of development in a way that it has not been done before. What we've always seen is looking at young people as a problem. This time round, as the administration of Uhuru Kenyatta, we are looking at the young people as the social investment for the country and for the country to progress. And therefore, the responsibility we have is to start to look at all the interventions. And we believe, as a government led by Uhuru Kenyatta, we believe that, number one, there are sufficient concepts, there are sufficient interventions, there are sufficient concept papers on youth and development and youth mainstreaming, and we don't have to continue to rethink. We now need to get to work and implement those programs, implement those projects, implement those interventions for one reason. We have enough young people who need these interventions, and majority of the people who have been having programs for the youth have been having programs that are geared towards meeting the expectations of our program and not having an impact on our young people. And so that is what my office and the Office of Youth and Development in the Office of the President is trying to do, mainstream the youth in the actual sense of the word mainstreaming, beginning to hold everyone accountable for the promises that we give to our young people.
That's good. So thank you for acknowledging that. But let's face it, and we'll try as much as possible not to be political. But we are talking about an administration, the Uhuru government, which has been in office for close to 8 or plus years. When the government came into office, they were duped as the digital age, the young Turks who understood the pain of the youth. We cannot continue to talk about what they can or will do. Let's talk about the practical part of it. What have they done so far? And I'm going to start with what is so near and dear to me. As a professor here in the United States, all students during the coronavirus pretty much are in school. Talking about all students across the US. All I know right now, to the end of the year, we'll still be running school as normal. Let's focus on Kenya and what you and the government of Uhuru Kenyatta is doing. As I understand it, pretty much the schools are closed. And up to the end of the year, it's likely that those students will not have access to education, which will mean, in the long run, we might not be able to compete effectively on the global stage. What is the position of the Uhuru administration, and particularly your desk, to make sure that the youth of our country do not lag behind, especially during this difficult time?
Thanks, Okari. One of the things, and thanks for KDRTV for even just giving us this opportunity to have this conversation. One, I may restrict my responses to my opinions because I don't represent the office of the Cabinet Secretary for Education. I don't represent the office of the government spokesperson, but I'm in government, and there are those questions that I may be able to answer based on my opinion and experience back at home. So in terms of the situation of education, Okari, one, it's the desire of everybody to be in school. It's the desire of everyone to have life as normal. The pandemic has taught us a few others. We started this conversation. The pandemic has changed even the way things are done in the US. Now, we must accept that technologically there are systems that you must put in place for effective learning to occur. If we wanted to be knee-jerk and start to say, okay, let's have e-learning to be done in the country, which is a new phenomenon that we need to strategically think about, it will be wrong for us to say that we will be learning as normal. Don't compare the United States of America with Kenya. Not that we are not technologically advanced, but there are systems that have been set previously, even way before Corona, in the United States that then facilitated the smooth transition that you're talking about. When it comes to Kenya, it's a whole new system that we must try and put together. And at the same time, I'm not, as I said earlier, it's not a question of defending the government, it's a question of being realistic in terms of what is happening on the ground, Banokari. Schools have been postponed, and the Ministry of Education is working around the clock to see how effectively we can engage our learners and to make sure that we don't lose this year. But at the same time, you need also to realize that recently we've changed the curriculum from the 844 that you used to know to competency-based curriculum, which is now focusing more on people's skill. and focusing on from standard 3, we want to be able to identify what is that talent that is with you that we need to nurture, we need to grow, so that we don't pump the theoretical kind of education into the heads of our young people. So, Banokari, I want to assure you that despite the fact that we might be losing this year, it does not mean that we've lost the learners who we have already changed the curriculum from the theoretical one to competency-based. And I want to tell you this, not in defense of government, the corona pandemic is a new phenomenon that we all needed to grapple with, and that's exactly what we are doing. Personally, I repeated class 5, but it did not dent me in a way that I am today. Sometimes we have to be realistic in what we are thrown in our way so that we don't end up complaining, Banokari.
The concern there, thank you, good response there, Walter. The concern there is particularly we're talking about cooperating with the diasporans. Most diasporans watching you, and I'll tell you this, I've been here for many years, they deeply care about what's happening in their home country. A lot of our people, particularly here in North America, send a lot of money to Kenya, in particular because they want the money to go to school. So clearly what they're concerned is about at least a commitment that there's a movement towards improving the standard of education and the students being in school. Let's move further and talk about your role as youth.
Before you leave there, Okari, there's and I appreciate that is why we are having this conversation with diaspora and the collaborations that, of course, the passion and the desire that you have to see the development happening back at home. Okari, let us separate aspirations and realities. Everybody is hopeful. We are all hopeful. But what are the realities that we have to grapple with? When it comes to diaspora expectations, I know it's very difficult for you here, Banokari. You know what you've been exposed to in the developed country. And that is what you want back at home. That's what you want for the country. And we've got to be realistic in the sense that, do we follow accurate information that is coming from the ground, or do we follow opinions that we are seeing on the social media platform? This is what is happening. This is not what is happening. I would want us to have detailed and a very structured conversation with diaspora in order for us to tap into immense value that you have as diaspora.
So that makes me skip a question that was good to follow. I'll come back to it to continue the conversation.
Okay. And how many minutes do we have before we go? And, by the way, this conversation is being followed everywhere, and thank you very much. My team, we're getting questions at Walter Mong'are Twitter handle, at Okari, Dr. Okari. Yani, it's so nice to just be here. So what's that question you wanted to ask?
So let's move. Thank you for viewers. If you have any questions, please post the questions on Facebook. We're being streamed live on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. If you post a question there, Walter will be able to answer those questions in a few moments. Let's move further. You mentioned about diasporans. There are diasporans who are deeply concerned, deeply, including myself. And you are here, you're talking on behalf of your role. What could you like, or what areas could you like to engage the diasporans so that they make your work easier, and by extension, make not the government of Kenya, quite frankly, but the country of Kenya move forward? Because clearly we're interested in making sure that our government and country compete effectively in the global stage. So what areas would you like to engage the diasporans?
There's that program that I normally hear countries across Africa putting together, the return of diaspora. Yeah. One of the things that I've always known, and that is why I would always, come back here, it's because, one, you have had the privilege, Banokari, and the rest of you in diaspora, to live both worlds, in the sense that you know exactly what it means to live in Africa, and you know what it means to live in America. Those experiences that you've had, those are the experiences that we need to bring back home. And bringing them back home needs to be in a realistic manner, as I said earlier, where we are not being opinionated in our thoughts. I understand, and I know that majority of the people here would want to invest back at home. And you have been investing back at home. Now, what you need to start monitoring is the governance and the systems back at home that then protect your investment. You can't continue to invest, and you're not investing in policies and legislation that is protecting your investment. That is what smart people will do, and that is what we will do. You're smart people here, you have investments back at home, but it's time you started putting systems in place that protect those investments.
Okay. So talking about that, that's good. I think if you watched my conversation last week with Professor Nyambane, a very excellent guy, but frankly appreciate the governor of Kisumu. He really engaged in a very candid conversation. And one of the things that I salute him, he was able to acknowledge on her that somehow the county government in Kenya and the government in Nairobi, in a sense, have failed the diasporans. There's been no serious commitment. And as you know, Mr. Walter, if there is no political will in any society, whether it's in Kenya or in the US, then it's almost unlikely for people to really engage constructively. And what we are asking diasporans, right, is there a political will, particularly from the Uhuru Kenyatta government, that will say, look, beyond whoever sitting in Washington as an ambassador, we need to focus on targeted population in the US and other countries around the world so that diasporans really contribute. So is there political will and commitment from government?
Banokari, this is a challenge I must throw back to you. The first time I came to the United States of America was in 2000. And in 2000, there was a grouping that was called Kenya Community Abroad, a very strong diaspora organization. Today, if I need to ask you a question, Banokari, who's diaspora? Who's diaspora in the sense that if someone is in Uganda, that is diaspora. If somebody is in America, that's diaspora. If somebody is in Australia, that's diaspora. Do we have a formal, structured way for us to engage with you as government as diaspora? Because government deals with a structured way of engagement. Now, the fact that you have many Kenyans who are in outskirts of Kenya, in other country overseas, does not necessarily constitute a formal structure of what you call diaspora. So my challenge to you is this: as you challenge the government of Kenya to engage diaspora effectively, who is diaspora? Do we have a definition? Do we have a very clear structure? Because when I see, for instance, we are talking about groupings of people in diaspora. Talk about the North American spectrum. You have people who are in Minnesota, there are people in New Jersey, there are people in Texas, and all of you have small cells of what you call diaspora organizations. How is the government going to be dealing with you when we don't have a formal structure or a formal body that we can call diaspora? That's the challenge I can give you, Banokari. We would want to engage you. Yes, we know that you send money at home because statistics are there in the excess of 300 billion. But that money is sent from you to your parents, to your relatives' pocket for subsistence kind of utilization. But we don't have a formal organization that we can call diaspora, that the government of Kenya that can engage with. So we have not failed you.
You know, when I hear that, there are those who are watching this and they're saying, wow, Walter is acknowledging something that we've always had a problem with. Yes. The fact that, and I said this again on air with Professor Nyong'o last week, the Kenyan government as an ambassador somewhere in Washington, I'll tell you, and I've always said, there is almost 150,000 ambassadors or Kenyan ambassadors in the US, because almost 90% of the Kenyans here do not know who is in Washington. Actually, I remember Elkanah Odembo used to go around the states to connect. So if we had a functioning ambassador in Washington who could reach out, I think it could be much easier for us to work together, and that way we speak one. But in as long as we're divided based on tribe and others, that would be a problem. That's going to be a problem. And I hope that's something your department and whoever is in government, make sure that the guy in Washington really commits to working with all groups here in the US and other parts of the world. That way we can have a coherent message for our people.
Banokari, before you go, on the aspect of a consulate, now you've got the embassy in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
You've got a consulate in L.A. in California.
Yes.
You've got an office, of course, the UN Permanent Representative Office in New York City, where Ambassador Mayo is the guy in charge of all these spaces. We have the Consular General in LA, that is in California, Njeri Karago. Listen, Banokari, please let us make use of these formal structures that are existing. In the meantime, as we streamline, we may have our challenges, but it does not mean that they don't exist. And you, as Minnesota, you can cross the border up to Canada. We've got 2 consulates there. Okay, one in Ontario. I think there's another one. There's another one in Quebec. All I'm trying to say here is, let us streamline. Let us rethink the strategy that is called diaspora. Let us begin to compute the value that you call diaspora. And that way, we can now make a case, and a justifiable case, to engage with the government of Kenya from a diaspora perspective. But as Walter Mong'are, I understand and I truly appreciate the value that you carry both economically and expertise as a Kenyan in diaspora.
Like when you're answering the question.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, very good point. So, and then there are young people. When you talk about youth development, I want to move quickly with this question, then we'll move on, talk about what brings you here and the connection to the community back in Kisii land, so that in fairness to time, so that other people can ask you a question. There are many young people here in the US who fall under that category of youth. Do you have a message for them?
Yes, number one, I want to say this, that I acknowledge the majority of the young people who are born here are more Americans than they are Kenyans. But of course, they've got their roots back in the country. Now, if there's anything I know, is the expertise that you have as young people. This country does not really need you, to be honest. America does not need your expertise. You can benefit from being here, but it does not need your expertise. Back at home in the country, we need your expertise. And that is why we're talking about strategic collaboration in terms of how do we link, how do we start to have a conversation. The Office of Youth and Development is open in the Office of the President to have strategic linkages with diaspora. Let's have a conversation. Let's begin to look at what skill set do you have that you can be able to bring back at home. Not forgetting that as you left the country or as you are born in America, also Kenya has not been left behind. As you will notice, with the new constitution that came in about 10 years ago, this is the 10th anniversary, with the new dispensation in terms of governance, we have the county governments, many opportunities for government leadership are existing. Young people must now begin to take responsibility because it's their time, it's their turn, and it's their future.
Very good. So I'm going to give the audience time to ask you questions, and they're getting the questions ready for you. Let's go. They say sometimes childhood begins at home, and that's part of why you are here. I want to make sure we respect the audience for that. Look at the Kisii land, right? Both Nyamira and Kisii. What two specific issues do you think are facing the two counties right now?
Just like any other new form of governance, remember that devolution is a concept that is less than 10 years old in the country. And let us be realistic. Let us not be hitting people so hard. Number one, the first 5 years of any governor was to do what you call institutional framework, to form a framework by which then development can occur or services can be delivered. The first 5 years, you can't say that any governor was doing some serious development that you can take track of. The second term, of course, now begins to give you a window of implementing some of those things that you've streamlined administratively for the first 5 years. And this is the time that we can begin to figure out what is it that is practical, what is it that can work, so that we begin to test the value of devolution in the next 5 years. So as a country, we must begin to give ourselves time to grow. The United States of America is in excess of 200 years in terms of governance structure. Okari, I'm not giving you an excuse. I can see your sheepish smile. I'm not giving you an excuse.
No, I like
being a realistic guy. Yeah.
No. You know, let me be honest with you.
Yeah.
Let me be honest with you. You know why I'm smiling? I remember you coming to KU, a young man, very skinny, very confused. You know, most people don't know you. You are fresh in KU, and I'm watching that little boy coming to KU, totally confused, running around in Yayawan, to Kirimambogo, to Longonot hostels, running out. And I'm seeing the transformation, the comedy. Now you are talking very presidential. You have no idea how much I'm so proud of you.
Thank you, Okari. Thank you. And don't start making me blush because we are on a global TV. But it's okay. I thank you. I thank you, and I really appreciate it.
We have to acknowledge. Let's give you credit where it deserves. But again, when you talk about that, the guys are preparing the question from the audience. Right? 5 government, honestly, Walter, is a long time. At least to do something good. There's the other counties in Kenya, and by the way, we need to make a comment about what the guy in Machakos is doing. Alfred Mutua just declared his interest for president of Kenya. from a distance, he seems to have done a good job. Professor Nyong'o in Kisumu seems to have done a good job. But I am not sure whether we've had a very clear message from Nyamira or Kisii town as what they have done. If they have done anything good, at least not most of us have not had it. If so, what three areas do you think they failed so far? And honestly, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging failure, because if you do acknowledge failure, that's how you learn. Which three areas do you fail?
Dr. Okari, in my vocabulary, we don't work with the word failure. We don't fail. However, we miss the steps. And where we miss the steps, that's acknowledged. We don't fail. Those are lessons that we learn. We set out to be successful. We miss the step and we rethink. Those are opportunities for us to rethink and do things differently. I will tell you this. I'm very, very positive in nature. I've seen one question from Jessica Michira here. What would diaspora do to influence the Kenyan politics? Which is what we are also talking about right now. I want you, Dr. Okari, using KDRTV, to spend time to highlight the positives and inspire people. Because that's how we grow people. That's how we inspire people. We don't inspire people by telling them negativities. So I refuse to acknowledge that there are failures, there are challenges. I must admit there are challenges. They are both administrative, they are political, they are leadership, they are governance, they are accountability issues, because majority of you, you want to shy away from vying for elective posts because you think that's a too small area for you to influence and impact society. And therefore you leave the popular guys to get into leadership positions and they don't deliver for you, Jack, and we complain. I want to ask us to begin to be accountable for what we ask or what we follow. Social media is open, but what is it that we are following? We want to follow negativity. We want to follow all the things that are not working. What about Dr. Okari following that is successful? How about ensuring that is successful, we scale it up and we multiply it? I want to believe that the administration of Nyagarama, Honorable Governor Nyagarama, and the governor of Kisii County, Honorable Elvis Ongwae, I think they have done the best they could to the limitations that they have. If they haven't done it, that is why we are coming up in the next 2 years to do a red card and to a scorecard and begin to have new leadership that is then vision-led as opposed to politics.
Thank you. I teach creative thinking and research, and sometimes we spend weeks talking about failure. Right? It sounds negative, but it's a pretty good thing. Honestly, when you acknowledge, and I was looking at the department of how your youth department, where you guys have done a strategic SWOT analysis of the youth development in Kenya. And in that section, where you're talking about strategic SWOT analysis, you've given the strengths and you've also acknowledged weaknesses, meaning that those are the weaknesses from which you're going to improve. So there's really nothing wrong with the county government or central government in Nairobi to acknowledge failure. And then
No. But Dr. Kari, it's not that we don't acknowledge that there are challenges and we have missed the steps. It's not failure, because when you use that word failure, and that is what I'm trying to run away from, and I can see Joshua Orenge here, we need specific assessment and goals for the future of our youth, and that's what we're talking about. Dr. Okari, listen, I acknowledge that we have not lived up to the expectations of everybody. All right, that is clear as it is, and we will never get there until we continue to be progressive in our thinking. But saying that we have failed is putting a mental positioning that is not helping you to grow.
Failure is part of it. Let's talk about this as well as we wait for another question to be put on the screen here. So when you're talking about the Kenyan composition as is, particularly, you can't avoid talking about tribe. Quite frankly, if Kenya is to move forward, obviously you're in government, and the best way you understand Kenyan politics pretty much talk about the tribes. If you talk about this particular tribe plus the other political tribe, that's who wins government, and if you win government, then you use the power that has been bestowed on you to your advantage, which means you appeal to the constituencies that put you in that position of power. Question for you, and in your position, how are you guys trying to, as best as you can, resolve or end the problem of tribalism and clanism in Kenya and in Kisii percent?
When I look at the population of the country, talking about 60% or 70% being young people and the median age being 20.1, I look at my daughter who's 21 and she's not Kisii, she's Kenyan. So I want to ask us, who is this propagating the tribal card? Because these young people are not tribal. I mean, where we are transmitting this from, there's a young man in this area, and he's a Kisii, but I can't hear him speak a word of Kisii, and if he does, it's for fun. He does not think as a Kisii, he thinks as a Kenyan. So who's this propagating the tribal aspect? But I want to assure you, Dr. Okari, that number one, I'm very, very proud to be Kisii, and that is diversity. Cultural diversity is positive. You are proud to be Kikuyu, and you must be proud to be Kikuyu. You must be proud to be Luo. You must be proud to be Mijikenda. You must be proud to be Kamba. Why do I say that? Because that diversity is what is strength that we need to tap into. So let us not look at it and start to say that's being tribal. It's basically being diverse. It's only when we start to use our community and ethnicity for purposes of, not being accountable in offices that we run, and we start giving other people who are from our community opportunity, that it becomes a problem. It's okay to be Kisii, it's okay to be Kikuyu, it's okay to be Luo, it's okay to be Turkana. That is diversity, and that cultural diversity is value for us. People will kill to have that. But I want to conclude this because I know you want me you want to run. Number one, there are people who have done a great job in the government of Kenya, both national and county governments. Let us not crucify those few who are not accountable, those few who are not transparent, those few unscrupulous, to crucify the entire government. Let us not use the pandemic as an excuse. Let us use it as an opportunity and a challenge for us to grow better, Dr. Okari.
Why we ask that question, Walter, and I understand, I'm glad you're spinning it in a very political way, which you're doing very, very, very eloquently. The reason why we do this, even in this country, there are issues in this country. We're not saying that this country is very perfect, right? There is also social stratification, right? There's white, there's blue, and we'll be talking about politics after the show. We're having professors coming on to talk about politics. You talk about America, you wonder which America we are talking about. Are you talking about the white America, black, Asian America? That's normal. But we're saying, we, the diasporans especially, when we hear people talk about tribalism in 2020, really that concerns us. We should be talking about global citizenship. When do we get to a point where you guys, especially you, because really the youth of the country are right on your desktop, when do we get to a point where we say we're Kenyans? Look at this, Walter. Look at this. You see what you see on the screen? I think you see this, right?
Of course, I got mine.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Let me tell you, for the countries that I've traveled to around the world, anytime people see this, the first thing they see is Kenya. That's a sense of national pride. What are you doing, especially your position, to make sure that really we talk about Kenya as a nation, not Kenya in terms of tribes? Especially, we should be competing on the global stage, not on a tribal basis, really. And then you can talk on the question from the audience.
Thank you. As we said, we have Kefa Otiso, who's asking, whose job is it to create the formal structure that I'm talking about? Why has the government not implemented the diaspora policy? I want to say this. Earlier on, Daktari, we were talking about defining diaspora. We have an entire Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it has a diaspora division. Now, majority of us do not accurately use those offices, and they only come to those offices when they're in trouble, which is something that we must begin to kill, Daktari. Let us engage with our government structures. Let us understand them. Let us know what we need from them. Let us engage. Let us know them. In North America, for instance, I can tell you for sure the number of people that the ministry, the embassy has of the Kenyans in North America is minimal compared to the accurate number that is here. Why? You only come to us when you have a problem. And that is not a way for us to engage. I want to encourage our diaspora families, brothers, sisters, please look at the embassies as your gateway to your country. Strengthen it, collaborate with it, connect with it, Get them to know what programs they have. Let us know where you are. And that way we can have a meaningful engagement. In the absence of that, we will continue to have busy conversations and whining, and that does not take us anywhere as a world. That is what you're talking about, Daktari, thinking myopic, and yet the rest of the countries are developing.
No, that's exactly the question they're asking you there. You see, Professor Otis asking you that question, whose role is it? If the government has said an ambassador to Washington who does not move beyond Washington or who is consumed in the politics of Washington, then that means the rest of the Kenyans in the mainland really miss out. There should be an outreach. And I gave an example to Professor Nyongo the other day, an example of Australia, which does very well. They are talking about really retaining, make sure that they do their best in their home country. And for those diasporans who want to return, including many doctors, Kenyan doctors, professors, people in the business community who want to come back home, but because there's no clear or political environment for them to survive, becomes a problem. The question is, what are the specific steps that the Kenyans, particularly through the Kenyan embassy in Washington, doing to make sure that we are part and parcel of the conversation? Because if we don't, then we do it individually, and by doing so, we are divided. Please answer that question, and then you can take on that question from Dennis on that.
Now, Dennis on that is talking about the future of creative industry in Kenya. Thank you very much, Dennis, and thanks for watching. Whose responsibility is it to have a good government structure? The responsibility lies in both the citizens and the leadership that is there. Policy framework, we hold the government that is in power responsible for having policies and frameworks that are respected, having legislation that is supporting those policies. That's a responsibility of a government that is in sitting. The responsibility of the citizens is to ensure that they elect or they put people of integrity, people who are accountable, people who can deliver on what you're talking about in offices. When you do not vote, what you normally do is you elect those that you don't want. Yes, I do understand. We are talking about diaspora. The aspect of voting, the reality, and that is the reality, and that is my opinion as Walter, and you can crucify me on this, Daktari. When we talk about numbers, because voting is about numbers, when we look at the voter registration back at home is in excess of 17 million. When we look at across those who are eligible to voting across the globe, in diaspora, I may not have accurate statistics on this, but I bet, Daktari, they may not be above 1 million. So from a planning perspective, it's natural for the government of Kenya to focus on the 17 million that is back in the country. And yes, we understand that it's a fundamental right for any Kenyan from wherever you are to vote. And I guess that's a question of lobbying now. That's a question of collaborations. That's a question of engagement. That's a question of how do we get this formal diaspora body that then engages with the embassies or engages with the government in a structured way where we respect the right of every Kenyan, despite of which part of the country or the part of the globe you are, for you to be able to exercise your democratic right. And I think that is not a fight. That is something that is obvious. The government of Uhuru Kenyatta must, and it's not an excuse we are going to give. We have the Department of Citizens under the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government, which our CS Fred Matiang'i heads. And I can assure you, and I can tell you today without fear of contradiction, there is a deliberate effort to tap and harness the value of you as diaspora. But we must also link with you in a formalized way.
I love it. You're really making a good defense for the administration. I love that. So the key point, you make a very good point. But what still underscores, based on how you're explaining this, how I wish whoever is in Washington as an ambassador could reach out to the community. And we're going to extend an invitation to a new ambassador, Mayo, to come on the show so that he, on behalf of the administration, can talk to Kenyans across the U.S. and friends of Kenya. So do you mind answering that question, I think, from Toy, who was asking? And that was the question I had for you. What are you doing? Because Kenyans will remember you because of entertainment and the comedy part of it. There are many Kenyans abroad who really are very good in that industry and who want to go back home, not just Peter Nyongo, but many others who want to come home. What are you going to do to help them out?
Well, thank you very much. And I thank you. I'm a sum total of the support of Kenyans and those who have watched me grow, those who have consumed my art, those who have watched and those who are following even some of the platforms that we are creating as we go. I want to tell you this. When it comes to the creative industry, the president has been very vocal in even recently, you saw during the pandemic, there was the aspect of the president offering, a package, a stimuli package for the creative industries to an excess of 100 million, which we are very grateful to His Excellency the President. We may have not satisfied everybody, but at least there is a step in the right direction. When it comes to the creative industry, it takes three things, Dr. Okari. Number one, we've got to identify those talents. Number two, we've got to nurture them. Number three, we've got to expose them. Number four, we've got to create infrastructure that then supports that we are identifying. That is what we are doing. Personally, together with the Kenya Film Classification Board, we are using platforms of Kenya Music Festival. We are using the platforms of Kenya Drama and Film Festivals to identify and nurture. The reason why we're doing that, Dr. Kari, it takes you about 4 years to finish a degree and for you to start looking for a job, but it takes identifying a young person at a tender age of their talent, and you can see what it can be able to do. We are a sum total. Personally, as Walter Mong'are, I'm where I am because of that talent, because of that internal deposit that I've got. Despite the fact that, yes, you know that I was in Kenyatta University, and yes, you did not need to tell people that I was in Nyayo 3, room 169. Yes, you did not need to tell them that I was running to the hostels. Yeah, I know what you meant. But I want to say that as a country, we are focusing on identifying, nurturing, and at the same time exposing that talent in a way that we can actually milk and give them the opportunity to expand what they have within. And that is why even the educational system, as the government of Kenya, we've changed it from the theoretical part. As we spoke earlier in this program, we talked about competency-based curriculum, where it's about your talent that now is taking you places.
Question here, and I'm not sure exactly how to frame it. Somebody's asking me to ask you this question. The question is about materialism, whatever that means. He's saying, and he's quoting Senator Mutula Kilonzo, I think in the Senate the other day, decried the situation in Kenya, and particularly with the youth, who have really focused a lot on materialism. He's saying a lot of young people, right, and particularly in schools, is giving 18% of children or kids in school, 18 who are aged between 15 and 19, are really suffering from pregnancies at that point. And also there's become more of what they're calling a sponsorship culture in Kenya. What will you do? Because that's really risky. When you see these things happening, it really says a lot about the nation. What are you doing, or will you do, to make sure that really kids at that age don't get in that situation, that we have children who are going to be the story of Kenya?
Dr. Without sounding like a government spokesperson, which I'm not, without sounding like a state house spokesperson, which I'm not, without going into the gender ministry and starting to spill out statistics and things like that, I want to restrict my opinions to my opinions. One, as a government official; two, as a Kenyan concerned with the welfare of all of us. Number one, the question of pregnancies is a moral issue. That is not a governance issue. It's a moral issue. We have a responsibility as parents. We have a responsibility as a society to guide our people in a way that is morally acceptable. When we talk about the issues of corruption, it's a moral fabric that has decayed. So that conversation, I would not want to divulge into having opinions about teenage pregnancy. I will take it as a personal responsibility. What am I doing as Walter Mong'are, as a parent and as a man who's in society? What are my values? What are the national values that we must begin to articulate? That is why we keep talking about what you see, what you hear, and what you consume defines who you become. Majority of us are consuming information and films and materials online that are not even useful, that are corrupting the moral fabric of society. So I will not take that argument into a governance issue.
Okay.
Yes.
Very good. So if we have about 2 minutes to finish, Ben, you can have another question for Walter here if there is any. Meanwhile, before we do that, as you relax, you can zip up a cup of water, Walter. And I want to ask you for...
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Did we just hang? Daktari, I didn't get to hear your question, but I can see Felix Nyangate here talking of a consulate office in LA and talking about where do we have numbers in Texas, Minnesota, and probably Atlanta. And all we are saying is, because you are here, you're in diaspora, maybe it's a question of justification. Maybe it's a question of you putting a question paper together that then we can be able to speak to the relevant ministries, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, speak to the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government, and be able to have a justifiable document that then enables the government to point its services to where they are needed. Felix, I've seen your question also, that you're talking about us coming out on a credible TV and defend the likes of Nyagarama. And as I said, I am not a spokesperson for Nyagarama. These are my opinions, and my opinions are not defense. These are my opinions based on the realities on the ground, Felix. And thank you very much for your question. And as you asked me how old is the Minister of Youth in Nyamira County, I work for the national government. I do know that leadership does not necessarily go with the age, but I do know that leadership goes with accountability and delivery. It does not matter who is in leadership. Whether you are old or young, the question is, are you delivering what you should be able to deliver? I've seen a question from Fred Amisi, the role I'm playing in nurturing talent. As I said earlier, I'm a walking testimony of all the opportunities that I've had and the number of people that have held their hands in the spaces that I've been. And in some cases, it's not a question of mentioning names, but I think records can stand for itself. And I want to appreciate all those questions that you're asking. I see Hilary Cheriot saying, yes, Hilary, thank you very much. I'm not so sure I'm talking about politics, Hilary, because you're talking about any plans for me to join politics come 2022. Hilary, I want to tell you, yes, I'm in politics all the time. I've been in politics. However, what we are looking forward to in 2022 is a country that is led with integrity, a country that has a leadership that is visionary, a country that has a leadership that is sensitive to the needs of the people, and therefore governance and leadership is what I'll be keen on come 2022, not necessarily politics. I see Catherine Kaoro. Why do you hire Kenyans who are in Kenya to run the embassy in diaspora? They do not really understand the urgency of the issues. Catherine, it's an administrative issue. Again, as I said earlier, these are my opinions, Catherine. These are not government answers. When it comes to hiring, there's a criteria by which then government hires its staff to do a job. You need to understand that the foreign missions are run by the parent ministry, which is Foreign Affairs, which is responsible for the hiring and equipping those offices across the globe. And therefore, it's natural for it to take first a country position and then to the missions. What I would encourage Catherine and all of us, if you think you're competent, please follow the government hiring processes, follow the advertisements that happen online, and see what opportunities open. And please do make the necessary applications. Daktari, I hope I've answered all the questions.
Yes.
And I'm sure you wanted to chase me away.
No, I'm going to ask you a last question. One more question before we go.
Yes. Yeah.
Walter, coronavirus has really put people in a very bad shape, but looking at you, you're pretty good looking. Can you share with our viewers what keeps you going? You look good, well dressed. What keeps you going?
First, good diet. Eat well. Sleep well, rest well, and keep negativity out of your system. Daktari, we must continue to be positive. I want to read something that I've received from Ezekiel Mtua, who's one of our collaborative agencies, the Kenya Film Classification Board, that is very keen on the moral fabric and trying to see what is it that people are consuming. And Ezekiel is saying Kenya has done well in building the physical infrastructure, that's the hardware, but the software of our values is totally broken. And our greatest challenge is the breakdown of our moral fabric. This can be done by influencing positive social values through film, drama, music, etc. And that is what we were talking about. Thank you, Dr. Ezekiel Mutua, for your contribution onto this. And that is what I said earlier. It's all about what is it that we take into our systems. Daktari, do we want us to run?
Now, if you don't mind, look straight to the camera, and I want you to do me one favor. There are many thousands and thousands of Kenya watching you across the U.S. and around the world, and others watching you from Kenya.
Yes.
I want you to talk directly to them, give them your closing statement. But before you do so, can you quickly state the role of the media, particularly KDRTV, in advancing this, and ask your viewers and friends and networks to subscribe to our show?
Thank you very much, Daktari. KDRTV, for this opportunity for us to have sane and candid conversation. And the reason why we're doing that is because we have begin to be accountable for what we say and how we say it. Many a times we have abused the instruments of communication. We have abused the privileges that we have on communication to share irrelevant information that does not inspire people. The role of media is to inform, is to inspire, and to impart the society positively. The question we must begin to ask ourselves as media is, before we air that story, of what national value is that story that we want to air? Is that a personal vendetta, or it's of national interest? Now, if we don't ask, if that thing that we want to air does not pass that minimum threshold of national importance, then we don't air it. That is the role of media, to inform the society and the citizenry in a way that they are able to make sensible decisions. I want to finish by saying, one, thank you, KDRTV, for giving me this opportunity to speak. And to those Kenyans in diaspora, I want to assure you that we do acknowledge the immense value that you carry as Kenyans across the world who have had the privilege to live in both worlds. You have an experience that people back home don't. You have exposure that we don't have back at home for those of us who have never left the country. And that is what we want to bring back into the country in a meaningful way. As for the young people, I want to ask you that it's time for you to look at your future yourselves, and do not allow those of us to give you thoughts of how you should run your life, but you need to use us as intergenerational linkage to show you what has worked before and what is working now. It's a question of combination of the hindsight, the present insight, and the foresight for purposes of prosperity. I thank you, and I look forward to continuing with the collaboration that we have with the people in diaspora, with our young people, for the prosperity of our country. God bless you, and God bless Kenya. Thank you.
Walter, I'm so sorry I have to make you do this. I am bombarded with messages here saying he looks very presidential, but we want him to be original. They're saying, can you be Moi for a minute? Make a closing statement, a Moi closing statement, and a dance before we let you off there. We'll not let you go before you do that.
Thank you, Daktari. Thank you. And allow me to do this because this was the signature of our president for more than 24 years in the country.
Ben should take me off the screen.
Yeah.
Ben, take me off the screen. Let him do that.
Yeah, and Karasi is asking, you said you're running for which office? Very articulate on issues. All the best. Thank you, bro. I'm sure come 2022 we will be able to know. And maybe Dr. Kari, it's time we started identifying people to give them a responsibility as opposed to people coming to ask you for votes. Please vote for me. And I finish by reading the speech written for me as the president. Nani ameandika hii kitu? Mungu awabariki. And goodbye. Thank you.
Okay, Walter, thank you. Hey, well, listen, Walter, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on here. It's been a delight having a conversation with you. Like I said moments ago, watching you come to KU many years ago, watching you grow to where you are, I'm so proud to call you a friend and a young brother. And I think the future really is very bright for you. And thank you for engaging us in this very, very, very nice conversation. So thank you very kindly. And we are looking forward to engaging further conversation with you. In the meantime...
No, thank you very much. I'm running to go and hang out with our community as we usher in the new leadership of Mwanya Getinge right here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I hope to see you there. And it's wonderful that we have a young person who's the president of Mwanya Getinge who's below 35. And that's the reason why I'm going there. The youth of this country are taking over. Thank you.
And it's a lady, and I will join you in the afternoon. So very good. So again, thank you, Walter. You did well on my chair there. I'll be going downstairs to anchor another show. For our viewers watching us here in the United States and elsewhere around the world, we welcome you. Our professor is standing by to talk about or dissect the political environment in the United States. Please stand by. For those ones who will be watching again next week, please remember we'll be having Dolphina Alego, that wonderful, extremely brilliant magistrate in Kakamega, Kenya, who is going to help us really dissect into the judicial system of Kenya. That is in 2 weeks' time. But in the meantime, before you go, or before we switch to another program, please go to Facebook on our Facebook page. Be sure to subscribe. We need you to subscribe.
Yeah. They need to hit these buttons that are scrolling down here. Please subscribe and be sending messages. Yes, yeah.
And then we should be able to do that. So again, stand by. Our professors are waiting by here to talk about the political environment in the United States. So thank you again. See you in a moment.
Thank you.